Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Kristopher Raos. We were just quickly talking about how your last name is your is your tag, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you started off doing graffiti.
Yeah.
That's your intro to art. I like to get into art origin stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that and one of the things that surprised me because your work is so deliberate in the way that it is that you don't have a BFA either, right?
No.
You never went to art school, so you're
I
entirely self-taught.
yeah, I took every possible art history class, like, after like a couple years out of high school at the community college.
Mm-hmm.
But never I kind of briefly started like the enrollment process at the Cal State
Mm-hmm.
in Bakersfield, but never really felt like I was able to sustain myself and go to like school for art. Like
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
never
yeah.
like something that was like um, like in my cards. It didn't feel like it was in my cards at least.
No, it's not a cheap thing to get into. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure everybody listening can tell us.
Yeah.
Um, so then, what is interesting to me about that is like basically art school. What I've come to realize is that it's not art business school. It's very much about learning how to have a practice. And
Mm-hmm.
then how did you transition from, I mean, I guess if you have a graffiti practice, it's still practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean
Like
you're
there's
kind
more
of
danger
developing.
involved, but you still have studio time even if it's outdoors.
Yeah, yeah. I mean you're building like a skill set that I think serves you, like if you were able to like transfer that over or even just like stay committed. Like I mean I
Mm-hmm.
was talking to a friend recently and we're like, we're both kind of from an origin of graffiti and we're now like having studio practices and we're like kind of reflecting. We're saying, we stayed committed doing this thing for over 15 years. No one was paying us. No one was like, on the contrary, we're dumping money when we
Yeah,
had
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah.
and no one's telling us to go do this. But we were so militant about what we were doing and so organized, and so I think like if you spend enough time doing that, I think
It
it
translates.
translates. Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah, it was one of those things that as I'm interviewing more and more people, I'm starting to realize what the art education is. And if you're self-taught, like I'm starting to realize that like you probably spend a lot more hours
Yeah.
than somebody that's in like an art class for
Mhm.
like 3 to 6 hours a week, or basically 6 hours a week, but split up into 3 hour classes, right?
Yeah.
Like you're probably thinking, eating, breathing,
Yeah.
all of that stuff for a very
All
long
day.
time. So what
Yeah.
was the scene like in Bakersfield?
I mean, there wasn't a scene very much in graffiti in Bakersfield, and so I think it made it easy. I would come to LA like in the early 2000s and kind of get a sort of a read on what they were doing here and then take it back to Bakersfield and say like,
Nice.
all right, they're painting all these like heaven spots and like this, they're painting these trucks and stuff like, so I kind of was like kind of shaping my practice based on what I would come down here and see, and then go and do it in Bakersfield. And I kind of got into some legal problems and
From graffiti?
from graffiti, and like I was so adamant that I wouldn't change my name, so I think I took it to the trains, and that was kind of
You wouldn't change your name in
m-
what sense?
like
Your tag?
my tag, yeah.
Okay. So
and
so your tag was getting you too much heat and you
in the
wouldn't
city,
in the
yeah,
city and you wouldn't switch it.
yeah, and so I took it like I kind of took a break and like went to like trains, started painting freight trains because
Uh-huh.
I don't think there's like a jurisdiction
Oh,
sort of.
really?
The city can't really they maybe are able to give you like a trespassing ticket,
Yeah, but that's about it.
but that's about it. And so I was like, all right, this is, and plus I think I really liked um that sort of pace because you'd go in there would be no one in there, you had your pick of the litter of what you wanted to paint as long as it wasn't painted.
Yeah.
And it's in that itself, like I developed like a work ethic with that because we'd keep the train yard clean. We'd
Yeah,
go in
yeah.
there, we wouldn't litter, we wouldn't we'd tape off all the numbers on the box cars so like the workers could still see the load limits and all
Nice.
of the codes that they needed to see. And so I think there like that really kind of I think that was like necessary to kind of like slow down from this sort of chasing like this prolific uh, sort of like status of like I'm up everywhere, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that like
You weren't
it
trying to
wasn't.
go. You weren't all city,
I kind of was, but like
but not that wasn't
but
the goal.
it wasn't, yeah, it wasn't the goal. So I
Yeah,
think doing the trains is really what activated my sense of like, like people would send me pictures like in Utah, New York, like all
nice.
over the states, and I'm like, okay, so this is reaching a broader audience, and it's like a pace that makes sense for me, and yeah, like I did that for a while, and
Did you ever get into? Because now I'm starting to see. Like I wonder if it's impossible to get into painting trains the way you have, because it reminds me of Margaret Kilgallen, I think
hmm
is the artist's name, who is basically the only person that I know that references like hobo traditions, graffiti hobo traditions. I
yeah,
think that that word is not. I think that that was like a self-applied word, so I'm
yeah,
hopefully not offending anybody with that. But I think
yeah.
there was like a tradition of like rapscallions and stuff, and
hmm
people that were just kind of outside of the.
Yeah, there's
It,
a whole culture like
there
that
still is,
that yeah,
right?
there
Yeah.
still is, yeah, very active. There, there's like I've ridden boxcars before, and there's like a whole sort of a map and like a legend, right? Like a legend that shows you how to like kind of train hop and do all these things. And I didn't really get into that much. But yeah, like those guys were there. There's a lot of people that are even deeper in that game
Hmm.
than I got into it, and
But isn't there also a tradition of the graffiti,
like the
of
hobo art,
hobo
yeah.
graffiti? Is that just different style wise kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I think like those monikers, like if you, I mean, for me, like I would paint, and if there was one of those monikers that I knew, like if a Margaret Killigan was on a train, I wouldn't paint over
Oh
that.
yeah, I
Like,
mean,
you know what I mean? Like that's something that, it's sacrilege almost. Like,
yeah,
and I kind of maintain that respect for, even if it was something I didn't notice, like or didn't recognize, I would still kind of just leave it because, it's just like my end goal wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna blast over everything,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm like the king of the art or whatever.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
like I was never. I guess I didn't have like enough ego to be a good graffiti artist. Like I don't know.
To catch beefs and stuff.
Yeah, like I didn't really wanted to keep it very like neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So then it sounds like there was a pretty decent train yard in Bakersfield.
Yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah.
that
I mean,
like
there's I think there's a one of the main connection
that makes
lines through
sense?
Bakersfield because I mean, there's a lot of agriculture. It's a big
Yeah.
agriculture city. I mean, there was different spots that we'd paint that I will not disclose because
Yeah. No, 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 no. We don't.
um
This isn't Vlad TV, dog.
but yeah, like you would go, you'd paint them, you wouldn't draw too much attention to the train yards.
Uh-huh.
You'd pick up after yourself, and I think it was self sufficient,
Well, when did you start making the transition into thinking more of like more in what people traditionally think of as like, because I think that that would be subcategorized as street art, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like whatever for better or worse, right?
Yeah.
But now you practice like you just had a show, you just curated a show
Mhm.
at As Is LA,
Yeah.
and so that's a different environment, right? And you're not doing the transition that people do, with like like you're not making Banksies inside of you're not
Yeah, yeah,
transferring,
yeah.
you're not like sorry, a better example would be like you're not Basquiating or Keith Haringing
Mhm.
it, where the same stuff you're doing outside, you're maybe having different conceptual conceits than you would have when you were thinking in terms of, which I mean I still think there's a conceptual practice in within the train yard thing,
Yeah.
right? Especially in terms of access and transportation and whatnot, and
Mhm.
like that's basically like what keeps America running in some ways, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to just use that. But when did you start becoming interested, and what did was it like a deliberate thing that you started thinking of like, okay, well, if I'm going to be doing this kind of a practice,
Yeah.
or did was it more organic?
Well, I mean, I would say I got a late start at spray painting because I mean, I've been on my own. Like I haven't like had really any connection with my biological family since I was like 16.
Okay.
I'm gonna be 37 now, so it's
Yeah,
been
yeah, that's a long time.
20 over 20 years, right? And so
More of your life than less of your life.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And um, so I didn't really start spray painting until like I can almost legally go buy the spray paint from the store. I
So you could go to jail and get into the legal problems that
yeah,
you got.
yeah. I mean, I discovered graffiti in Mexico City, and I think
Okay.
on top of being in that environment as a kid and having that sort of freedom and no responsibilities, also discovering that art form there, I think was
Mm.
so important because it opened like literally like I remember as a kid I would draw lowriders, Virgin Marys. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
all the
Yeah.
stuff you've seen kind of in your neighborhood
Yeah,
or
yeah.
the one piece of art or iconography that hangs in every Latino's house, which
Hmm.
is tends to be religious.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
like those are the things you draw. I remember sitting on the corner like um in the neighborhood and like this guy walks up to me and he's like, "Oh, like I've been noticing you come out and draw and stuff like that." And he's like, "But have you ever seen any artwork like this?" And he opens up this black book and I was like, "Oh my God, like what is this?" Right? Like I didn't really think about it as words. Like I just
Yeah,
seen
yeah.
it abstractly, right? So I
Yeah,
was looking at the
yeah.
colors, the forms and all those things and just kind of like all the sort of draftsmanship that it required, right? And that always stuck with me. And so like I knew that like in my late teens, being around all these instruments is actually reminding me like when I was in my like 16, 17 years old, I was in a band and
Oh,
I was like
nice.
I want to make music, like I want to talk about my story, like I want to like kind of
Yeah.
and it wasn't for me because I had a lot of stage fright. Like
Yeah.
I would
Oh,
sit
dude.
there like and practice with the friends and we had a band and whatever, but
Whenever anybody asks me about these, I have to like admit that I just play in my bedroom.
I mean, I still have a guitar at the house, right?
Okay.
And I was
Yeah.
actually going to ask you, where's a good place to get a capo? Because I think I need a capo.
Oh, I mean, we can definitely cover that. I
Uh,
mean, honestly, Amazon.
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Uh,
I've given in.
but I guess to answer your question, like I've always been interested. Like I took after high school, like I was reluctant to go back to school because like so when I was 16, I was homeless and barely finished high school, and so like that already felt like an achievement for me. Like, and I was
Well,
like, all
to
right, well,
finish high school when you're homeless for what you like the 2 years of high school,
hmm
that's not easy.
yeah, it was kind of it
I
was a
mean,
lot,
it's
right?
amazing that you even did it, you know?
Yeah,
Like a lot of people would have just gone for the GED.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
That was like on the table too. It was like,
did the routine help you while you were in that situation?
yeah, I think so.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
You
I've
did it
always had a
like
creative like impulse, and like my parents didn't support that, and so like
okay.
it wasn't like something that was like nurtured very early on from your parents and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that, and that's um that's neither here nor there. It's not like a, oh well, like your parents support you and my parents didn't support. It's like
No, no,
it's
no,
not,
no,
it's
no, no, no,
it's
no, no,
not
no.
like
But I mean, I as you say that, I'm like, oh man, that sounds like a nightmare because
yeah
I've definitely had support,
yeah
and I think a lot of people do get that. What what stood out to me a little bit more was sort of if you lose your home or your family, and
mm-hmm
then you don't also want to lose your social circle. That
mm-hmm
maybe you have some friends at school, so
yeah
it's just interesting to me, like
yeah
that you finish. You know, like it seems like what was happening at your house was probably uh not something that was happening you like not everybody hated you or not everybody
yeah
you weren't having conflict with everybody,
yeah
so you found a way to sort of still have a network, which
yeah.
makes sense.
I
And
mean,
yeah,
high school for me was like it was like an escape from
yeah,
the house. Like there
yeah,
was a lot
yeah,
of chaos happening in the house, and so like I utilized being at school as like socializing,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
It
for
was a way
sure.
to kind of release what I really wanted to do, and like
Yeah,
we weren't allowed to like go and hang out with friends after school and do all those
that
other
makes
social
sense.
things. So I maximized my time at school being a fucking clown. And um
You were a class clown kind of thing, or no?
not
I,
not
I,
major. Like
yeah,
if I had a couple close friends, I would, try to be a class clown around them, but
yeah.
not like I don't really like attention.
I was obnoxiously a class clown, and now I have a podcast, so it tracks.
The track. Like,
Yeah.
but so I guess to answer your question, it's like simultaneously as I was like developing a graffiti practice, I was like, well, if I'm going to invest like this energy, like I really want to also learn art history. Like I want to
Yeah.
see what I can pull from the books into my practice. And so like simultaneously, I mean, I really took to like the classical like Renaissance periods and stuff like
Mm.
that. And I thought it was because it was so like proficient and so technical like that I thought I liked it. And then it didn't really dawn on me until a little bit later that I think it was like all the symbolism, like all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
little kind of like things that like someone like Michelangelo would like hide in the paintings, right? And so like that was really like what attracted me to that. But then it really didn't keep me from falling asleep in class.
No, no, I'm sure.
And one of my teachers was like, the class that we took, that was an art history class. I remember falling asleep, and probably because I was out all night spray painting,
Hmm.
and I was like falling asleep, and I kind of like heard her say, well, like if you want to break the rules, you have to know them. And I was like,
Yeah,
that was like the
yeah,
light
yeah.
bulb moment. I was like, all right, I should pay attention, and but still I was like really bored with all the classical stuff. And I remember I still have the art book from that class where I grabbed the chunk of, pages and turned forward and landed on Frank Stella and Ellsworth Kelly.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, how is that art?
Yeah, yeah.
Like
You had to like,
why is this in this book? Like you have
mhm.
all this large, probably 3/4 of the book is all this classical painting. Why is this in here? And like I was kind of appalled by it. Like I was kind of offended, right? I'm
Oh,
like,
wow.
and but like
No, but
but
that makes it. People go through that.
I
Yeah.
knew that if that was what was making me feel something, I had to like kind of figure out what that was. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I kind of like I have a couple good friends that are from Bakersfield that I spent, most of my life painting with. And when I started kind of like reducing my graffiti down, like maybe not outlining in certain areas or not
Uh,
putting dimensions on certain parts of the letters, they would be like, is this finished? Or like, what are you doing here? Like, this looks like shit. Like,
yeah,
what are you
yeah.
doing? And like, so from a very early on, like I do know that I was dabbling with like reduction in my
Yeah, yeah.
practice and trying to figure out what makes sense for what I enjoy seeing. Yeah.
One of the things that you do a lot of stuff with branding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not to give my only reference again to the graffiti transition that I feel like there is something spiritually aligned with the Kilgallen stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because you're still working with signage. Like, I find it really interesting that two people that used to bomb trains,
Mm-hmm.
are very much interested in this text element of stuff. So it's just more an observation than a question. I don't mean to like
Yeah.
leave you in a spot, but what is like, I get it. Like, when I walked into your studio, there's one piece that you just completely recreated, a faded sign, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, my God, this poor dog.
Well, it's kind of like the by right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
the
I'm
by
still
right
looking
sign.
at sort of these landmarks, and it's some of the more recent works, there are sort of like tropes of like more popular branding and stuff like that,
Yeah,
which I kind of like.
I like
I
the
don't
Marlboro stuff.
Yeah, like I don't want to go too deep into
Yeah.
that, but if there is sort of like I had someone over at the studio recently, and I think they brought up Andy Warhol, right? And it's
Mm.
like,
Yeah, but I don't. But you know what? I get why they brought it up. But what I like about what I think is interesting that people who may have not seen the work should understand is that you're making these things into abstractions.
mm-hmm,
So you're making these especially the Marlboro one, right? Like, it becomes something else, and oh my God, this dog, it becomes something entirely different when you do that, because you're basically turning a recognizable symbol into a fraction of itself, um and almost like your response is different. You
Hmm.
recognize it. There's a recognition to it, but it's not like, oh, that's Marlboro. It's like
Yeah.
it puts the branding to the background, even though
Mm.
you're using the branding, which is really interesting.
Well, like for that piece in particular, like I wasn't actually like I did a couple renditions and I posted on my Instagram like kind of like the reference points, like which is I think I was like kind of I'm coming out of this solo show that I had at Charlie's in
Hmm.
November,
Oh
and
yeah.
a
So
lot of that
for
was
people that don't know, you're represented by Charlie, and you've
Charlie
done
Tunes, yeah.
you've been with them 2 years, and you've done one show each year.
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and he's taken me to some fairs and it's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
good. He's done a lot of good stuff for me.
Cool. I
Really.
didn't mean to derail
Yeah,
you.
no, no.
I wanted to give that credit because I
Yeah.
should have probably given it at
Charlie
the
James
beginning.
Gallery.
Charlie James Gallery. Yeah,
Shout out.
we definitely have had a few artists, or maybe one.
Yeah, Elmer. I think
Yeah,
Elmer.
I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
only
yeah.
Elmer. But I know a few of them, so I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I've had them all on the show. Anyway, but sorry, I interrupted you with that
With the
tidbit.
Marlboro. So like yeah, it came off the end of that solo show that was very kind of heavy on the um race inspired subject matter, and with like most of my work like there's like an entry point, like I'll go into it like I'm not like a race car fanatic, and I kept like running into these people that are like, oh, like have you seen the F1 blah 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 blah, and I'm
You're lucky I didn't come to your
like
show.
I like I mean I like it, but I don't follow it,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
I mean I feel like my sort of fascination with car culture is all from like kind of like a fascination with the object, like the
Uh,
beauty of the object, right?
no,
Like
for
the
sure, for
elegance of
sure.
it. And I mean, I think that tracks back to as early on as like, my stepdad used to like buy these like junk cars and try to flip them and stuff like that. And I remember, you
Try
know,
or succeed.
I think he tried. He did, wasn't very
Okay.
good at it. Yeah. And I remember like, we had this Buick Regal, and we had I think it was like a 78 Camaro, Super Sport maybe.
Oh wow.
And I remember that was like, so like,
Both amazing cars.
yeah, 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 and I drove both of those cars, and
Oh
they were
wow.
really nice. The Regal was like really nice because it's like driving like a sofa, like one of those
That
big ass
that's the one that
lazy
has
boy.
the concealed lights. The,
No, that one didn't have the concealed lights. That one had
the
like the two square lights in the
okay.
front. Yeah.
All right. It was a later gen.
And it was like two-tone, right? So it was like a
Mhm.
champagne and like navy blue or something like that with like the silver trim.
Love it,
But I
dude.
remember like being under the hood of the car and just like being fascinated with like the bolts and like the machine stuff, like these objects that just feel good in your hand, or like, like this is something that like, the engine, the system of the combustible engine is such a sort of
Have you,
milestone for civilization.
dude? I'm fascinated with how much power those things can get. Like, have you ever been to there's the Pomona Speedway here? They have the
No,
drag races there,
mm-mm,
dude.
I gotta go.
Go
I gotta
one
go.
time. I mean, it's expensive. It's like $100+ bucks, but like, there's like a subgenre of videos on YouTube. You can look it up. Is like people reacting to their first drag race,
Mm,
and like everybody thinks that they're ready for how loud that shit is, but like
yeah,
it just wrecks you. Like
yeah,
it
yeah.
hits you so hard. And one of the things that's amazing is just like when these cars pop wheelies,
Mm-hmm.
it's insane. Like,
Yeah.
think about how strong every element of that is. The chassis has to be
Mm-hmm.
firm and all of that.
Yeah.
And then they hit the wheelie bars and just
Mm-hmm.
like, and then like that's considered. I didn't even know that's considered inefficient. Like, so if you pop a wheelie, you have
It's
too
in
much
yeah.
power.
Mm-hmm.
You're hooking, but you're slowing yourself
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
down by catching all that air.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Anyway, thus ends the car podcast segment. But
But
yeah, no, I totally relate to that. I mean, like I know that there's a moment right now where everybody's very upset about car pollution, and that makes total sense, and I'm not
yeah.
against that. But man, Mad Max, I want my
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
I'll
think
take that over an
I
electric.
don't think that like gas-powered cars are gonna ever go away. Um,
Have you seen how dangerous like the
the
fires that
the electric cars.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah. My
they
my
burn down
brother
a
and
whole parking
my
lot.
brother-in-law's a firefighter, and he's
Oh,
like, they had to like rewrite different procedures to handle those cars
it's
because
insane. They don't turn
they
off.
can't they
Yeah,
can't really touch it for a minute, like,
yeah,
and when it starts to go like
yeah, yeah,
catch fire.
yeah. And then and then also there's all the whole lithium extraction, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of, you know, it,
Exploitative.
yeah,
I mean,
exploitative, and
putting
like
it
leads
lightly.
to sanctions, and
Yeah.
just kind of is never going to let Latin America kind of rise up because it's all there. So I don't know.
Yeah.
In terms of like the ethical questions of whether it's okay to like muscle cars, I've gotten past like
Yeah.
I've gotten
Well,
past the
I just think
ecological impact. I understand if that makes people upset.
yeah,
That's okay.
I think just public transit in America needs to
Yeah, yeah,
become more accessible. It
yeah.
needs to, I mean, there's so much like I guess economical sort of restraints on people, right? Or like if you ride the bus, you're poor.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're walking, you're poor.
Yeah,
Like
especially in this town.
In Bakersfield, no one walks.
Yeah.
Like, and
I
if you're
mean,
walking, you're looked at like, oh my God, this guy's like homeless,
I
right?
tried to get my friend to walk a mile in Miami and he was appalled. And I was like, "No, we can do it." A
Yeah.
mile, dude.
I mean, which is like for me, it's like I love walking. Like
Yeah.
like me and my partner, if like we go travel somewhere, it's like especially not so much now because I'm not really actively tagging on things, but I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, we're gonna start here and we're gonna walk all of the city because I want to put my stickers up. I want to tag on this stuff and you cover a lot of miles like that walking, and you get to
Yeah.
see the city like that.
I
Um,
think that when we're done recording this episode, we're gonna look on the Citizen app, and there's like a murder happening right next door because these
these
dogs are
dogs.
just
Oh
like, dude,
shit.
they've never been like this.
Hmm.
Anyway, I just want to acknowledge
Yeah,
them
yeah,
because they just won't stop. But I'm loving the conversation. So okay, let's get away from like nerd boy talk
yeah.
and get
So,
back into sophisticated art stuff.
okay.
Um, so, well, I mean, I totally get the machinery thing also with the trains, right? Like those things are like so powerful they could just crush you.
Mm-hmm.
Like anytime you're dealing with these like man-made forces, like seeming when man harnesses the forces of nature, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just like terrifying with those things. But all right, so then can you tell me a little bit more about the signage and sort of the interest in that, because it like I would describe your work as abstract. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even when like I can read the sign and all of that. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the sentiments. I think that like as opposed to, even though it's signage and stuff like that, it's presented in a way that is like as far removed from figurative and realism as I would say as general abstraction is,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not I and it's funny like with the Marlboro piece, that was supposed to go to Dallas, but it didn't end up making it and coincidentally like it got curated into a show at the Hole
Mm-hmm.
and in conjunction with like the Ed Ruscha retrospective that's
Oh,
happening and
that's
so
right. Yeah.
they're trying to kind of have a conversation with contemporaries that are practicing in LA and yeah, it was a really good piece to put in because I wasn't like, I was kind of on the tail end of not the tail end, but like I really wanted to kind of expand on this race ephemera that I was sampling
And by
and
race, you mean
race
racing,
culture,
like
sponsor culture,
not
advertisement, signage,
not the
right?
other usage of race, which is like
No, no, no,
ethnicity and
no.
race. You're talking about racing.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
race
Okay. Yeah.
race
Yeah.
cars,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
not race.
No. 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 I know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so like I was really thinking of like because it was gonna go to Dallas, and so I was like thinking like landscape. I was thinking like this kind of gabled home peak. Like it was to me it felt like a landscape, like a
Yeah.
literal
Yeah.
landscape, and not just kind of the format that it is, but just it felt like a landscape.
No. No. It definitely reads like that. Yeah.
Um, and I think that's what I'm looking for, and when I'm using text, I'm not looking to try and tell you to read something. I'm kind of really interested in how different sort of characteristics of typefaces sort of lend themselves to abstraction. Like people use a ruler to draw from one corner to the other corner and split the space, and you have like a minimalist painting. I feel like that's what my interest in text is, and I think
Hmm.
because maybe I don't want to harp too much on graffiti anymore.
No. I mean,
It's been a while. It's been like a long time since I've been comfortable sort of talking about the two together because
it's been so long.
well, it's been so long, but also like I don't want to be like categorized as a street artist that turned into a
Hmm.
studio artist, because that's not the case. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I think those interests were always running parallel.
Hmm.
Um, but spending so much time painting up close and trying to understand that someone's gonna see this flying by.
Hmm.
They're gonna see this from afar. They're not gonna like. They're gonna. And there's like crazy examples. I'll send you. Maybe I'll send you some pictures of like photos that people have taken of my work, and it's like you see it from like a couple hundred yards away,
Yeah.
and so like you're thinking, all right, what's all the necessary stuff that people are gonna register when they're seeing this thing driving by, um, from afar? What details are registering? What actually is like working from a
Hmm.
visual standpoint? And I think, I didn't learn that in art school. I learned that,
In the
being
field.
in the field, saying like, okay, well, like from friends and that are critical. Like I feel like I was talking to my friend Gajin Fujita, who's an artist who has a very graffiti forward, I don't want to say aesthetic, but the language that is in his work. And we were talking. I was like, man, it was actually so nice because your homies, your friends, and none of them are like going to art school. None of them have an MFA, but they're very critical of you. They're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Yo, that shit's whack. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
fix those letters." And in the moment, you're like, you're just being a fucking asshole. Like, but you take that, if you're willing, you take that consideration, and you develop a better hand style, or your letters get better. Like your technique gets better, and I feel like we haven't been able to really talk about art like that anymore. We haven't been able to be like, "Yo, like I really like, I see what you're doing, but like what about some of this?" Or like
You
without
mean you mean more you like the art world has kind of gone away from technical virtuosity kind of thing?
not just technical, but just criticism in general. I think like you
Yeah.
can't be critical. I mean, you can. People are critical. I mean, I'm not gonna say that no one's being critical, but I think overall there's a sense that you just have to kind of be positive, lead with the positive, right? And
No, I would say that. I mean, you're not gonna show up to someone's opening and be like, "This sucks."
no, no, no.
But I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying in the broader sense. Maybe art criticism has kind of become more diplomatic, in a
Yeah.
sense. Which I would say, I would be interested to have someone on the show because I had Matt Stromberg and I had Melina Paris, who are both cultural journalists.
Mhm.
They do stuff about the art world, but they're not, and they do criticism, but they're not specifically critics. And it would be
Mhm.
interesting to talk to somebody who is
Who's a
just
critic?
just a critic, because even like someone like Jerry Saltz, I don't really like he would probably, I don't think that he's like that critical. Like he's
No.
like
No,
it's
no.
more art philosophy that
I
he
think there was
that
a time, like maybe like 5+ years back, where people were kind of like, all right, like if I get Jerry Saltz to put eyes on the work, like that's it. Like
yeah,
he's gonna either give it the thumbs down or thumbs up, and he's the tastemaker, right, or
yeah,
something, or one of the tastemakers.
yeah.
And I mean, I don't care what he says about my work.
But I think that in more specifically, like in the sense of like just raw art criticism, like when's the last time you read a piece where someone was like, "This show was awful," like why would it, like you read
I
it?
don't think I've read anything
Yeah, like
like.
that,
I
right?
mean, I'm fairly like new, I guess, in the conversation of like contemporary art, because I think I've been practicing actively since like 2014.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
So
mean,
10 years.
I'm
Yeah.
also showing my ignorance because I really don't know. If anybody watching now knows of any critics that I should research, art critics that like just tear people's stuff apart,
Send
but
them send them to my studio.
no.
I mean, I thrive on that shit.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. I
I
meant like comment down below, but
I
but if they comment, I'll try to get them to your studio.
yeah.
But no, I mean it's interesting. All right, how comfortable are you talking about just the business in general of art? Like not like the numbers and stuff, but just sort of how you see things going,
Mm,
in terms of like in terms of trends and whatnot.
I'm pretty comfortable, I think.
Because
I think about it all the time.
we talked a little bit about it at your studio. We did a studio visit,
Yeah.
and You said you had some interesting things to say. I don't know how comfortable you are repeating all of them, but
Yeah.
one of the things that like it's kind of established that there's like a movement right now to have a lot of artists of color,
Mm-hmm.
showing, and I would say that you probably fall even though you're more white passing like me,
Yeah.
you fall into that category of being a Latino artist.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you talk to me is that you are also you like, as this sort of trend happens, you become more concerned with how to maintain longevity in this
Mm-hmm.
situation, and especially for someone, right, like you, who is Latino, but you're not necessarily making figurative work of
Yeah.
people like, the difference being with, you can put up a piece and it'd be like visibly of a person of color
Yeah.
versus you actually have to read the name to
Mm-hmm.
see that, you
Yeah.
know,
This might be a
this
brown
might,
person.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And obviously tastes are always going to change. Like, figurative work comes in and out of fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious about some of those thoughts.
As does abstraction, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Uh. Well, I mean, I was listening to one of your podcasts and recently, and they were forget who was the person you were interviewing, but you guys, I what stood out to me was you guys were talking about like the cynicism of the art world, right?
Oh, it's probably Alexander Sanchez.
Maybe
Yeah,
yes, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah.
And I don't think that that the art world is intentionally cynical,
Hmm.
or like not transparent by intentional design. Like I think it does what it's always done,
Yeah, yeah. I agree
which
with that.
which which is kind of for me the kind of red flag that's like, oh, then why would I really put all my cards in that on that table to like, you know, for social justice and all these, all the not to say that there hasn't been a lot of great work that's been done in the last few years. That's also not right either. But to put like kind of these political social problems in the hands and give all this responsibility to a market is kind of like the thing that's it's kind of scary to me because it's like, well, the markets change.
Yeah,
Markets are about making money, and what sort of these marginalized communities, historically marginalized communities, need are something that are going to live long past a market, a trend.
hmm,
Like maybe if like healthcare, education, all like the foundational things were already dialed in, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation because you'd have brown people who were inherently going to all these Ivy League schools, studying art, building art collections, um, being on boards at museums,
yeah.
having capital to, not need to play if they don't want to play,
Yeah.
and uh, I don't know if that partially answers your
No, no,
question.
it does. It does. And what I think is, I think it's an interesting way of looking at the art world in general, because, like, even even if you get somehow to be righteous about some specific topic and actually make some waves,
Yeah.
there's things that play and there's things that don't.
Mhm.
Like, look at what's happening right now. I'm
Mhm.
not seeing a tremendous amount of art about what's happening in Gaza.
No.
Like,
No.
there's not for all the um marginalized communities, the opportunities provided to marginalized communities that came after George Floyd.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that I've said repeatedly on this show is that when the situation with George Floyd happened, I thought we finally had an understanding of imperialism,
Mhm.
and and we didn't. We did, like, it was a lot of people were only concerned with what was happening within our borders, and they could give a shit about what was happening in other countries,
Mhm.
and it's almost kind of manic and insane in this country when we have people that are like, they want gun control,
Mhm.
but they also really love arms sales. They're like, the natural impulse is like, we got to give weapons to Ukraine. We got to give weapons to Israel. So there's this mania that happens, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that one of the things that you said is that the art world isn't necessarily cynical on purpose, but but it's a reflection. It exists within the world, right?
Yeah.
And so like Matt Stromberg, one of the things he was saying is that he doesn't necessarily think of it as like the art world. He thinks of it as art worlds, right? Which
Yeah.
is a
Yeah. Yeah.
really
And
good way
that's
of putting it, because there's like there are separate different communities. But yeah, ultimately the tastes of the people in charge are good. So and then also, like, does it invalidate
yeah.
things when certain things get promoted up to high levels, but we can't.
I mean, for like in reference to like kind of like the 2020, like post 2020 after the George Floyd things happened, it was like, um, I mean, in
And then
20,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to take away anything from any artist that has had success.
No, 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 absolutely
Elmer,
not.
you, Tita, you're all quality artists that deserved a shot, right?
Thank you.
Like
Thank
that
you.
have, like, this is not a cynical about like your success. I'm saying, like, how can these careers keep going?
Yeah. Well,
When these things
I
happen.
mean, before that, so like I had, I think one of my more serious, or at least what felt serious to me, shows was in 2008 at Mars Gallery.
Oh, okay.
I made 30 paintings for that show and like worked tirelessly to get that done with like this is shoestring budget. Like it was all on me, right? And it went into the gallery and it didn't really bear fruit.
Uh,
And on top of that, I think it was during the period where like the Defend Boyle Heights thing was happening.
yeah.
And
Was it in Boyle
it wasn't
Heights? Oh, okay.
Mars Gallery is right there on Anderson and like Fourth, like
Okay.
just kind of like right. Actually, it's right under the Sixth Street Bridge.
Okay.
Um, and like I mean, we opened with like my nationality, my names, like this whole identity thing for me personally. I mean, and I'll say this is speaking just from my experience, and everybody's experience is different, but the whole identity thing has been a lifelong thing for me. I don't
Mm.
I don't have a family. Like I don't have a last name. I didn't inherit anything, so I feel like I've spent most of my life kind of in a pressure cooker of this same conversation. So 37 years. And
And are you tired of it, or are you? Is that what I'm picking up,
well,
or is it? It's
well,
like it's not new.
in the last like year or so, I feel like my nervous system is just inflamed because it's like it to me it feels like we're watching the 80s, which is I was produced in the 80s
Uh huh.
from a mom and a dad that were addicts
Uh huh.
on Social Security, on welfare, in the system.
Uh huh.
Like, I barely escaped the whole prison or school to prison system. That was
Yeah.
actually what happened in middle school for me. Is like I got sent to the principal's office, and there was a police officer there for like a dispute with another student,
Oh wow.
and they arrested me, processed me, took me to juvenile hall, put me in camp, and because I was an introvert and I for the longest time I've been fighting being part of groups.
Uh huh.
I think that was helpful for me. It kept me out of like the enticingness of joining a gang or
Yeah. Yeah.
doing these things. Like even in graffiti, like I was kind of a loner
Yeah. Yeah.
because I try to. I think it's just my natural impulse because of that to avoid groups.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it just seems like we're repeating the 80s and 90s again. I mean,
In what
George
sense?
Floyd, Rodney King,
Oh, okay. Okay. I see that.
culturally.
Yeah.
Tupac and Biggie, Kendrick and Lamar.
Yeah.
Or sorry,
Ken-
Kendrick Lamar and Drake.
Drake.
It's
Yeah.
like we are in real time watching history repeat itself, and politically,
Yeah.
economically, we're what all these things are like happening that happened in the late 80s, early 90s.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
And
And
I
then
just
I
feel like
think,
my body is on fire because it's like, oh, we're about to live in a
yeah.
period which produced me,
Yeah.
you know?
Man, I hope it leads to the 90s, but I'm not that hopeful. No, but it makes sense, because I really think that, like, even, I don't know, like, I was not conscious enough to understand the political sentiment of the time. But I
Mhm.
remember sort of the idea of Dukakis being weak and all of these things, and
Yeah.
it is, it's to me it's crazy how much the people that are like supposed to protect marginalized communities and whatnot
Mhm.
have the ethics of Reaganites.
Yeah, yeah.
And that to me, it I think ties into it. Not to get too overtly like specifically electoral politicsy, because I
Yeah.
really don't care. I honestly am like so burnt out by
Yeah.
what's happening that like anybody that tells me that I should care about which
Yeah.
person that is going to do harm externally,
Yeah.
is going to sell weapons, and then we're going to, like one of the things about these, like when people are all about like let's give weapons,
Yeah.
going back to what you were saying, like that's how you lose track of weapons, and then that's how you have uh terrorist organizations end
Mhm.
up with it, and that's how you end up with these forever wars. So
Mhm.
not to be conspiratorial, but there is a benefit. There's a financial benefit, and then it's a self-perpetuating thing where it's like, well, now we got to get these weapons away from these people, you
Yeah.
know. It's wild. It is a really really wild time. So then to expect, like you said, going back to what you said very eloquently, going back to the idea of like how a market is going to be, like
Yeah.
people in this market are probably not divesting.
No, 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 exactly.
Especially because like do you know that like there was a woman named Abby Martin, and she was going to give a lecture, and she had to sign a solidarity clause with Israel to do a lecture at a public university,
Oh, wow.
and she had to say that she was not going to support BDS, and then she
That's
sued, and then won, and then I
Mhm.
think the last I heard, it got turned over.
No, I'm not
So
I was
so it's like this stuff has been going on very very intensely, like
Yeah.
and in a capitalist society to say that you can't boycott something is an interesting,
Mhm.
because it's free market, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, like
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing, and now I'm nervous because I said all this stuff about the current conflict, but I just want to be clear. I humanize everybody. I
Yeah.
think that it's just as important to humanize people that are victims as it is to humanize people that are perpetrators of violence,
Mhm.
right? So I humanize the IDF and Hamas because it's good to know what these people. I don't support hate. I don't. I
Yeah.
support humanization, but it's important to remember that these people that do harm are also humans. They're a
Yeah.
reflection of us, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I
Maybe
mean
this is all coming out.
I mean, I think, um, I heard this panel discussion that this artist that I really like, Hugo McLeod,
Mhm.
and they did it in Miami, I think 2022 during Basel, and they were talking about, and it was a panel of all black artists, and the panelist was a with who was leading the panel was black as well, and they were talking about, I'm paraphrasing, they were talking about sort of like the success they've been having, how they feel about it, but like, what about next year? Like, if we come here next year, like, what are we going to be talking about? Are we going to be talking about our identities? Like, when is it going to be time to just kind of be artists?
And when are people going to be tired of hearing about identities?
Yeah,
Anything. It's like eating filet mignon every day. You want
yeah,
something new,
yeah,
and everything kind of has a backlash too. Like
yeah.
there's to deny that there's been a backlash to the Black Lives Matter era
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah,
is just plain keeping your eyes shut.
yeah.
But yeah,
And I mean, I'm not well versed enough in any of those things because I feel like I put myself in the place of trying to be inquisitive. I'm
yeah,
always learning. I think my learning started from 16 till now. And
mhm,
so like I've never, tried to like preach politics and preach, oh, like these are the values that are correct, or
yeah,
this is
yeah.
what's going to work and that doesn't work. Like I'm never like on the stance of like imagining that I have this solution.
No, yeah,
Um and I think I treat my work that way. But I feel like brown artists still probably make the least amount of money. They
probably, yeah.
work probably twice as hard, and just putting like the work values just out on the table. It's like that doesn't even like that doesn't even give you time and space for your personal selves. Like all the personal time that you need as an artist. to kind of reconcile with like this last body of work you just did. Where does this go? Is it done? Does it need more? Like, I think, brown and black people still are working the hardest,
Yeah, yeah.
and they have
Well,
to explain themselves the most.
and then one thing, yeah, it's and also they are. It's almost like there's an expectation of performativeness, right? Like
Mhm.
like for example, just me as a Cuban, I am very much I very much appreciate a lot of the art that came from El Exilio. You know, the diaspora.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
but that's a very specific
Yeah.
uh yeah kind of art. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to make that art about my Cuban identity
Yeah.
because honestly, I mean I've never even been to Cuba, so like for me to
Yeah.
but there's opportunity within that and there's expectation, right?
Mhm.
I'd love to have like Cuban money backing me.
Yeah.
Like because there's a considerable amount of it available for the arts in Miami, and I definitely want to, but I don't necessarily want to have to be like a Cuban artist
Yeah.
to make myself relevant to those people.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think like, like where I fall in the I don't even know if I'm part of the conversation, but like if if I was grouped as an artist of color or a brown artist or a Latinx artist,
Yeah.
like for me, like I have it's always been conflicting because it's like, when I lived in Mexico, like Mexico City, we lived on the outskirts and we had to drive into the city. And so like the outskirts were kind of dilapidated, like dirt roads. My tios were peseros, and so they
Mm-hmm.
would drive these like Volkswagen Beetles or the buses
Mm-hmm.
because those were the only things that would go out of the city into these streets because the bigger have you been to Mexico City?
No, no,
No?
no. I've only been to
You
Tijuana.
you see these like kind of green, kind of like they look like they're all fiberglass. They're very stylized. The dashes have all these colors. Like I grew up seeing that stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
mean I would ride with my uncle in his combi and do routes with him.
Mm-hmm.
But like it never occurred to me to appropriate that aesthetic,
Yeah.
right? It never seemed like it was it didn't seem an aesthetic that was there to service the art world
Yeah,
or
yeah.
an art practice, right? And so it is kind of interesting that
And also, I mean, if like everybody likes to talk about privilege, we got passports. We got
yeah,
American passports.
yeah,
That
yeah, yeah.
makes in our community that makes a huge difference.
My in-laws, they're like, we tell them all the time, I think we're gonna get dual citizenship. They're like, don't do it. Like, and they're from Mexico. They're from Guadalajara and Sinaloa. Like,
No.
they're like, well, because like we've thought about doing that, but like everybody says like if you go down there, they're gonna treat you like shit. Keep your U.S. Passport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even as immigrants that came here and got their U.S. passports, they know that they hold a level of privilege. I don't know if they understand it as a privilege, but they know that it's better.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
better to
no, for
have
sure.
that USA shield right there on your blue passport than a dual citizenship, right? Because then you're gonna like Latinos in Mexico, like,
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably a revelation to like white folks who are starting to go down to Mexico City and like, populate those areas, but there's white Mexicans.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. No, I mean that is mind-boggling. Like the difficulty that Americans have with that is
Yeah.
insane. It really is.
And
Go ahead.
um and like why is like the image of the brown artist that's coming from Mexico like Frida Kahlo or Diego Rivera
Yeah,
and not like like especially contemporary artists, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
Gabriel Orozco, Gabriel Kuri, like all these artists who are conceptual artists. Like, I got a sliver of that when I was young, and I was like, it had the same sort of visceral reaction to like seeing that Kelly and Frank Stella is like, why is this art? Why is this deflated soccer ball?
Yeah, yeah.
And they're thinking they're being conceptual, and it's just like I think the American version of a brown Mexican artist is more ornate, right?
Hmm.
It's sort of a character,
Yeah, yeah.
a
It's like Pancho
caricature.
Villa.
Yeah,
It's
Pancho
like
Villa.
like it's have you ever been to oh well, I guess you're from the West Coast. There's a place in it's between South Carolina and North Carolina, and it's called South of the Border because it's south of the North Carolina border, and it is like the most delightfully racist thing you've ever seen. But
Yeah.
their mascot is Pedro, and he's got a
Mm.
sombrero, and it's all of that shit, you know. But I think that it's somewhere in there. There's like a maybe more elevated and more respectful, but
Yeah.
it's still a caricature, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like yeah, 100%. I mean, it is it like when I go back to Miami, I say this all the time. Like you try to talk to a person from Miami, a Cuban from Miami, the same way that people out here talk to Latinos, like with
Mhm.
that level of condescension and like it doesn't register.
No.
They don't live that life
I mean, you
because
don't even have to go that far. I mean, go back to Bakersfield. Go
yeah,
back to Bakersfield, and it's like the last 4 years. And I'm not gonna generalize and say that no one has changed or nothing has changed, but if I go back to my old neighborhood, nothing has changed. It's
yeah,
gotten worse.
yeah,
And so it's like, how has there been, this, you know, sort of abolishment of disparity, but you go just over the mountains an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, and it's like we're still stuck in a time period,
yeah,
and it's just like I think I think the major cities have this sort of righteousness to them, right? Like, oh, we know it all, we've cured it, we're the best,
hmm
and then realize like, oh, well, they're just right outside of, you probably go to the IE and and no one cares. Not
yeah.
no disrespect to the IE. I think I have a lot of friends that are from
No, no. Well, the
there.
IE probably doesn't care about LA. Is I think what you were
Well,
saying.
I feel
Yeah.
like LA is like, or IE people are like the most. I feel like said this to someone recently. Like, I feel like IE people are more LA than LA people.
Oh, really? What does
Yeah.
that mean?
I mean, I think there's just like, it's like, especially with social media, you'll have people who are from like a city like Bakersfield that will still live in Bakersfield and only post shit that they do when they come to LA.
Oh, okay. I
Right?
get
They're
what
kind
you're
of
saying.
ashamed of it.
Oh, that makes sense.
So like they're like
Yeah.
they'll post on their thing Cali living. But what
Yeah.
part of California are you from? Like, are you Central Valley? Like, it's always almost biasing like the major cities, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm NorCal. Like, so like people are just gonna, and I'll post all my San Francisco shots or Southern Cal, and I'll just all my beach shots and all the touristy spots in Los Angeles, right? Like I feel like though like the cities outside of these major cities like operate like that. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's
It's
crazy.
no, that makes sense. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, well, when we had our studio visit, you also made an interesting point, which I think I've made in other ways. But for the podcast, I'll put it like this because I don't exactly remember what you said, but it was basically like the idea that something has changed because you have artists of color being represented in galleries. Like, yeah, that's an interesting first step with the enthusiasm that we have now. But ultimately, like, are the spaces selling to like people of color? Are they, because there's definitely an interest in keeping things in certain collections, and like, are the opportunities for black collectors there to have access the same way that white collectors do to these spaces, right?
Yeah.
And how are those relationships still like the mega structure above where all the players play is still pretty much. I mean, maybe they've done it. Maybe there's like a real effort to do that, but it seems like a band-aid more than
Mhm.
like a structural reimagining of this market and economy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think if it isn't if it doesn't exist now, like I think our generation is gonna have to be the ones who do it. If
Wait, how
not,
old are you?
I'm 37,
37. Okay.
so
I mean, I think we're running out
eh,
of time.
yeah, I think so.
I think we got to
Um,
leave it up to Gen Z, which seems to be doing pretty good.
yeah,
I'll
hopefully.
definitely give them their due.
Yeah. But I don't know, like I mean, we have, because I don't have a relationship with my biological parents, so my in-laws are my those are my parents,
Hmm.
and they'll come to my openings. They go to all my openings, and they every single time they're just kind of scratching their head. Y la gente quiere comprar esto, like, or por qué está tan ¿por qué cuesta tanto?
Yeah.
Nadie me va a pagar por esto. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and they don't own art, and
Yeah.
they don't have access to that. And it's just like, I can't be the only person that is experiencing that.
No,
And
that
having
yeah,
this
yeah.
question of like, well, like, how am I selling work and getting to, first off, like I couldn't, I'm super fortunate that I get to do this.
Yeah.
And, like when I do sell work, it sells. And, that's such a surreal thing for me to finally, I've been here for 14 years, and out of 14 years, 12 of those years were hustle, hustle, hustle. And now we're kind of reckoning with like a little bit of success, and then how does that success transfer over to your sort of um, your heritage or your family, your roots, and all those things. And it's not happening.
Yeah.
My in-laws aren't getting richer because I'm making money off of artwork. They're not
Yeah.
they're not stakeholders at the Guggenheim or
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
like on the board or any of those things. Like, um, but maybe our generation will, right? And um, there's this really nice piece that I'll paraphrase from James Baldwin, where he's like saying like, it's taken my time. I'm 60 years old. It's taken my sister's time. It's taken my mother's time. Like, how much time do you need for your change, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like I feel like we're back in that moment where we're like, all right, well, like, yes, we've let some people in to play and make some money, but like, how does that translate to generational growth,
Yeah.
generational wealth? And I don't know. It's um I didn't think that I would be even concerning myself with with these questions as an artist, right? Like, I
No,
just want to
yeah.
go in and make work. And it so happens that some of the motifs that I use, w- well, they always tend to be biographical. They start sort of very organically and not overly controlled. They just kind of come to me, and then the more I sit with them, it kind of starts to resonate. And then as it resonates, there almost always tends to be like a biological connection. Like the Marlboro
Mm.
thing, is like, it's very, very attractive. It's got nice lines and a nice weight to it. But like, there's also like, my stepdad used to make me pick up all his cigarettes
Yeah.
butts, and he used to smoke Marlboros, right?
Mm.
So there is a connection that is very sort of not so light in the work, right? And I
Yeah.
think all of my work tends to go back to my childhood in some way or another. But um I think the access point is universal. Like,
Yeah.
and
But I think what's interesting about that is that there's also the pitfall, which is kind of what we're talking in a broader sense of the academic gaze, right? Which tends to still be very white. So
mhm.
like someone could look at your piece and look at the fact that you're Latino and be like, "Oh yeah, these companies are predatory towards the Latino community," which has nothing to do with what you're actually making work about,
No,
right?
no.
But do you see how that context, like you get what I'm saying about that context? Like, yes, you are a Latino artist. We're giving you opportunities, but we still see you as a victim, kind of thing. Which I
Yeah.
think is a very, very powerful thing that happens, especially in Los Angeles. The way that people perceive, like, I'm horrified half the time with like with elections, just how people talk about like, oh,
Yeah.
you need to vote for these brown people, and it's like these brown people don't believe in abortion. I always say this. I've said this
Yeah.
a couple times on the show, but they're anti-abortion, and like you're using them as a symbol for your righteousness. It's like a white savior narrative that people have. So
Yeah.
it really is hard. It's a difficult thing to like. It's not just the infrastructural thing that we were talking about and like the
Yeah.
generational thing, but like even as you're perceived, going back to what you were saying about the panel of artists that were saying that like, when are we just artists instead of
Mhm.
being black artists, instead of
Yeah.
having that qualifier? So it's really interesting. I mean, I love the work, and it never even occurred to me, but sometimes I try to put on that academic like perception of it, and it's
Yeah.
like it can be so dismissive.
Yeah. Well, I think my work, like, and this is probably the class clown in me that's
Mm.
coming out in my work, is kind of making fun at the institution,
Yeah.
at the academic like structure, because I think I use that as a sort of inlet to how to see my work. Is like, if you see it from afar, you're kind of, oh, it's minimalism, it's hard edge, it's this is like probably a white person doing this. It
Mhm.
comes from the school or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you catch a little glimpse of something that's kind of like you overseen the first time, and maybe it's like a verse from one of my favorite rap songs or something like that, and
Yeah.
then you start to like realize, oh, maybe this isn't such a serious thing. Like, let me look at this differently. Let me reconsider this, and I think all of that has to do with my personal traumas coming from where I came from. It's like, you know, it's 2024,
Yeah.
in 2012, I barely started talking about all of like my biography, right? This has been new because people are starting to ask about me,
Yeah.
and it doesn't feel natural to not talk about where I started,
Yeah.
because I think that's informing where I'm at, why I'm using the sort of visual cues that I'm using, and I think it's adding to I think it's adding to my personal interests as an artist and where I want to be going. But I think it is a different way to be in conversation with art history, if it ever gets to that point, but also, you know, talk about things that people don't want to talk about.
Mhm.
I think the work itself is just an entry point to more conversation.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't feel comfortable talking about. I mean, we're millennials, right? Well,
Yeah.
actually, no, you're not a millennial. You're
I'm last year of Gen X.
Yes. So we came from a time and part of that generation where you don't talk about your problems.
No, yeah.
Like, I've always dressed this way,
Yeah.
even when I was doing graffiti. Like, no one knew or cared. Like, no one took me serious because I wasn't like dripped out in like graffiti swag, right? Or
Yeah.
like, and I think that kind of, I guess that was a quirk that probably maybe held me back, and it was like easier to be like, nah, feels like a weirdo, like he's not dressed
Yeah.
like us, right? Um, and so like I think people think like, oh, if you like, crop your pants, or you're dressed a certain way, like you're not brown, right? You're
Mhm.
not dressed in Dickies, you're not brown, like,
Yeah.
um, you're not painting landscapes about like agriculture and like field workers, like you're not brown, like.
Oh no, the people out here police the shit out of your ethnicity, especially if you're white passing. And
Yeah.
oddly enough, it's mostly the white people that do that.
Yeah.
You
Oh
know,
yeah.
no Latinos ever like, no, no, tú no eres prieto.
Me and my partner, will be walking down the street, and there'll be a señora or señor like walking
Yeah,
by, and they'll immediately talk to us in
yeah,
Spanish
yeah, for sure.
every time.
Pero tienes la cara.
But
Me too. You know,
but if
like,
you talk to, a white person, or and then right now we're like in a really good time and space where brown people want to say like, well, you're not brown enough, or like
yeah,
you're white passing, and it's just like, yeah, yeah, you're right. Like, I don't deny that maybe my complexion gives me some privilege, or a privilege or whatever, but like
that doesn't take away
the
from the shit that you put up
yeah,
with.
yeah, and I don't know. I guess the word hegemony.
Hegemony, I think.
Hegemony? Yeah, right,
Hegemony.
right, where it's like you're kinda like my parents try to do that to me. They try to say, "Well, like, you wanna do this? Well, you're abandoning us," right? Or
Oh yeah,
you think you're better than us because
yeah,
you wanna be an artist or something like that. Like, there's still a lot of that, like, very, um, that stuff's still alive and well.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
for sure.
it's causing, I think, like, a lot of tension amongst a lot of brown people, even
Yeah.
within their own communities.
Yeah, I mean, I try to not. I try to just not think about it. You know, because I get everything. I get people think I'm Jewish. People think that I'm Arab. I'm
Yeah,
like every ethnicity in the Middle East. I get called
nice.
out here, and it's an interesting thing. I try to just kind of go with it, you know, but sometimes you get reactions from people and you're like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I mean, ultimately like I mean that's why I start the episode with your art origin story. You know,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
every guest, I want to know where people are from because it's like you're not making art in a vacuum. You know,
No.
these experiences they're relevant, and I totally relate to you with in terms of like you know just having your experiences minimized. You know, like people do say fucked up shit to us.
Yeah.
I know for sure that they've said it to you. And then like when you try to express that, you kind of get just like shut down. Like, well, it's not bad enough of a problem, but it's
Mhm.
like okay,
Yeah.
but don't aren't we anti-racist?
Yeah. 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 No,
But
and
then it just becomes a teachable moment for me to understand like, and I'm like, dude, I probably understand better than you, white person.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like, and then like that's one of the things that drives me insane. Just
Yeah.
like white people telling me about the suffering of my like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's that
Well,
election thing again.
well, you know, I just had a visit, and I pulled out this old painting from like 2017. That was like in that Mars
Hmm.
gallery period of work that I was doing, and it has this void in the middle of the surface that's a cinder block size.
Hmm.
It's the specs of a cinder block, and I was doing these kind of sort of abstraction cinder block pieces because I was doing like the grid, which is like the grout marks that is
Hmm.
very like typographically identifiable as cinder blocks, and I was
Yeah.
just actually focusing on one and kind of moving it around on the surface. But this one in particular has like this embossed, textured American flag that I lifted off of like a probably like a sort of day laborer's van that he had bought from someone else, right?
Hmm.
And he just kept all the graphics on it
Yeah.
that existed. And those are things that like stand out to me, sort of like the Mickey Mouse that they say, like the Mickey Mouse kind of bootleg things. Bootleg aesthetics are very
Yeah.
appealing to me because I mean I
Yeah.
grew up in it and around it. But so I did this painting, and it has like the texture of the American flag, and then it has a smiley face, which were two things that already existed. And in the middle of it, there's this plexi box that I inserted, and you don't really see it. It's kind of invisible, but it has like like rastered on it and like a nice kind of I forget the typeface, but it's it feels very proprietary to like a bank or something, and it just
Hmm.
says "Who will survive in America?" And you don't really see it until you get close. And I brought that piece out because like I think that piece I made that in 2017, and when I was it was based on this Gil Scott Heron. You know Gil Scott Heron? He's a musician, kind
The
of
name.
poet.
Okay, the name sort of rings a bell,
Uh,
but
Um, well, he has this song like song where it opens up with like the I think it I don't want to be instrumentally incorrect, but I think it's like bongos.
okay.
And so it's got a nice rhythm, and they're building the rhythm. And as he's like kind of like doing what do you call it? Like poetry or what is it when it's like off the top of your head?
Slam
Mm,
freestyle.
freestyle poetry or
Okay.
something. Anyway, so he's saying all this stuff, and he's talking about sort of like the 60s civil rights stuff, and he's talking about like the Students for a Democratic Society and all the rainbow conspiracy and all these things. And it was really like kind of haunting because it's like, all right, so he was singing this in the 60s, about sort of the civil rights and racism and sort of how the state of the economy was, and I was like, all right, well, we're living through that. But what was more disturbing to me is that it seemed like as he was saying all the problems, he was calling out sort of the white liberals at that time and how they had antidotes to the problems that they were perpetuating on
Mm.
black and brown people.
Hmm.
And he's like, there's a line in the song that says, say, it's like something like they have all these like sort of liberal. I'm paraphrasing here, like these liberal white students who were out here fighting the cause with the black people on the streets, and you'll do that because you go home with a clear conscience and a college degree.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, that's like exactly what's happening. You have all these sort of neoliberal, our generation, Gen Zs, millennials that are uber educated. They're out here slumming it, looking bummy because their parents are paying their rent
Mm.
because of all these things. And I think what happens, and each time there's a point like this, is that, like, it's like the sheep in wolf's clothing,
Mm.
right? Like,
Well, I mean, there's definitely a case to be made for that in terms of the boomers, right? Because
yeah,
they ended up selling out a lot of those traditions. One of the things that I've heard someone say, the what ends up happening is because these people have those resources and they're getting arrested, they're not going to be allowed to kind of serve out the problems of
mm-hmm,
the of so in a sense they're the ones that have the most power to do this
yeah,
because they have the resources to fight against the justice system, that which is not to take away from your argument. It's an observation that I think highlights what you're saying, which
yeah,
is sort of like uh there is a privilege to being able to do this,
sure, yeah,
because yes, they're being threatened with their careers and all of that, and I do think that to a very large degree they're brave.
yeah,
I don't want to minimize them just because of their class benefits, but I would also add that they can do that. Like, what do we lose if we go out and protest? We lose a lot, right?
everything, yeah,
Like especially at my age, I'm not trying to get out there, get like, when cops want to fuck with you, they fuck with you,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and so to have the backing of like parents that are can help you with these things. I think there's a bravery, but it's also a privilege to be able to
sure,
protest on that scale and risk that much.
yeah,
I definitely agree with you that it is an interesting thing. Um, and I just want to just reiterate for YouTube policies that
yes,
we think everybody is a human being.
absolutely,
Everybody is a
yeah,
human being, and we can learn from everybody. And
yeah,
there is something unfortunate that happens with human beings every now and then, where they do a lot of harm to each other.
mm-hmm,
And instead of just calling those people non-human, it's
yeah,
very instructive to remember that they are of us. They're
absolutely,
part of our broader community,
yeah,
and to understand why those things are happening is much more instructive than to just be like everybody's a bad person. And I
yeah,
don't want anyone to die.
no,
Eh,
no, absolutely not,
I just to be clear,
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
and yeah, I don't condone any actions taken by any organizations right now that have
yeah,
done harm or violence, but I do support nonviolent protest a lot.
yeah,
Whether or not I can understand why certain parties in a certain situation
mm-hmm,
are doing something is entirely besides the point. I just want to be clear that we're all human beings in this situation, and we're
sure,
hurting each other, and it's appalling,
yeah,
and
absolutely,
I think we can agree on that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but anyway, we've been going for a minute now.
Is that a good
What?
thing or a bad thing?
No, no, no. It's a great thing. It gives me a lot of room to cut out politically
Okay.
questionable things when I go back and listen. It's
Yeah.
always fine when I listen to it, but I'm always nervous.
Yeah.
Um, so anything that we can promote for you, the show is up at as is LA. I don't know when does it run to?
I'm like blanking. It opened Saturday and
Is it like a month?
it's like a 6 week thing.
6 week thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
probably still be up by the time this comes out.
Yeah. A lot
Um,
of great artists that
when was the opening? So the people have
Saturday, May 18th.
May 18th. So it's 6 weeks from May 18th. It'll
Yeah.
still be up. What else can we promote?
I think that's about it at the
What's your
moment.
Instagram?
It's just Kristopher with the K, Kristopher _Raos. Yeah,
Raos.
Raos. Yeah. Other than that, yeah,
Just chilling.
just chilling, trying
If
to
anybody has
keep my peace.
any inquiries on his work, you could probably go to Charlie James.
Yeah, Charlie
Yeah.
James. Yeah. But yeah, it's I think we're supposed to talk about longevity, right? So
Who? Oh, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think all of these questions, I think, should
Well,
translate to.
if you have anything about longevity, I mean, I always give people a chance at the end when I wrap up to if there's anything that was left out.
Yeah, I mean, I think what ignited this interest was to try and kind of start asking questions about, how to make this last, right? How to
Hmm.
make um a profession as a studio artist, be long term, because you know, part of the show is like getting to connect with older artists as well. Like I've been really deep in conversation with Victor Estrada,
Hmm.
and getting to see how late things come for certain people, and like how regardless they persist, and they keep producing work, and like how do we get to a period in our studio practices where we're giving ourselves time to think, rest, and enjoy life, have a life outside of the studio, so we're not just always on art mode, and
Mm.
how and then having all this like chaos happening in the world, and art being that band-aid for the world, like how do we make this more sustainable for the long game,
Yeah.
I think that was what the kind of thesis of that last show was, that I had at Charlie James. The title was "Slow and Steady Wins the Race." And just it's just kind of like it was me asking, how do you slow down and take your time and spend your time really working through ideas. We have tons of art history that tells us, some of these artists didn't make it till they were 50, didn't have
Hmm.
their first shows until they were 50. Um,
You're making me feel better.
No, I mean all of it, all of,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
most of like like the like 19th century artists weren't having their first shows until they were. I don't even the 50's not even old.
yeah, yeah,
Um, like how do we make our, especially with social media, you're seeing kind of people's success happening in real time frequently, and it doesn't help you feel any better about you not having things coming up, or
yeah,
the common question that I get now is like, oh, when's your next show?
yeah.
It's like, I just had a show in November. I have a piece over here, I have a piece over there. I made some work for Dallas Art Fair. How hard am I supposed to be going?
Yeah, yeah,
Especially when you think about like, if you're trying to build a market, like how if you're just pumping out painting after painting, is it really worth these high price tags?
yeah,
If you're just kind of machine like working like a machine, or like I really want to get to a point where all of us, the whole art community, if we can, especially like speaking about like all the artists of color who've been able to establish careers in the last few years, like Tita Whitney is a good example.
yeah,
Like Tita is like a beast, like she's working crazy, and I'm like, man, like that's tired. I'm getting tired watching, like not of the
yeah,
work, but I'm like tired for her, because I'm like,
yeah,
damn, like I know this like she has such a prolific output, and that the works are incredible, incredibly
yeah.
detailed, and it's just like,
Same thing with Elmer too. Like
yeah, Elmer.
the work ethic. I think that one thing that I have learned is that I need to step it up if I want to reach that level, because the work ethic that these artists have is fucking insane. It really,
Yeah,
really is. These people are in the studio all the time. Like it's a full time job.
yeah,
It's hard hitting. You know.
yeah. But on the other hand too, it's like, and I think it's because we're Latinos, and we're told that our output is our value. We have to like find a balance of like we shouldn't have to be working all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's going to be inherent in some artists. Like I heard someone, like, boasting like, "Oh, I'm in the studio for like 12, 15, 16 hours. Like you can't, like you can't touch my work ethic." And it's just like, do you really want to be working like that hard all the time?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always had to keep a job, since I was 16 years old. And if you give them more hours, they'll take those fucking
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
So it's like work hard when it needs to be done, but also be easy on yourself and take personal time, because I think that's part of the thing that we're glazing over here is like, you know, you have, white artists who get to do whatever the fuck they want and whenever the fuck they want, and no one asks a question. But like, you have all these brown and black artists who are like have to sell it as like, I put in all these hours, I
Yeah, yeah.
worked this hard. This is why it's important. Like,
No.
please buy this. You know?
That's interesting what you say, because yeah, I think that there is a sort of like people love it, like that guy that recently said that his collecting of the money was the work. Do you
Yeah.
remember
He turned in like a couple blank canvases and then
yeah,
just collected them.
the
Yeah.
money? And I'm like, the balls on this guy.
Yeah. I mean, if that was
Yeah.
an artist of color, that would have been straight to jail.
Well, we'll see. This white guy might end up in jail. I know that the gallery wasn't happy, but I get what you're saying. No,
Yeah.
point very well taken. Yeah, I think that there is sort of a, like narrative wise in that white gaze thing that we were talking about,
Yeah.
like people like the narrative of a person of color working really really hard,
Yeah.
whereas they kind of like the innate genius of somebody that is less ethnic that might just kind of show up and genius shit happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Because I mean, and maybe that does happen when you get rest.
yeah, yeah.
I feel
Yeah,
like
maybe.
some of the best ideas that I have is like when I'm not thinking about making art,
Yeah,
and I just got to like flag them and go back to them. But yeah, long game. I feel like, I'm 37. I know artists that are 27.
yeah.
How can you keep up that output and that, like
For that many years,
for
yeah.
by the time you're my age, and
That's
I would
another. That's
say
a
I'm kind of
decade. Yeah,
young,
yeah, yeah,
a decade in the art world is probably brutal.
yeah,
Like that's a long career for a young artist.
yeah.
That's why it's kind of sometimes it's better to just keep your head down, keep making the work. Kind of, I think one of the, I think it was- don't quote me on this. I believe it was Cy Twombly
Mm-hmm.
who says, "Go as long as you can without being known." I mean, honestly, I think the reason why I'm having such a burst right now is because I came to LA to be an artist.
Mm-hmm.
I came to LA because I knew it was going to be hard. I came to LA to put in the work. I knew,
Yeah,
I came into it, through the inlet of graffiti, which is a very aggressive toxic masculinity. You're not shit. You're not going to be shit. Locals only. You don't belong here. And I still came,
yeah, yeah.
And so like I knew it wasn't going to be easy. And now looking back, like 12 years into it, or like 14 years, two of which I've been able to sustain myself, like doing it full time. But for those 12 years, no one cared about what I was doing.
No,
And you just got to keep doing it,
no.
and
Do you?
there was a lot of freedom in that. No one was telling me what they thought was better than what it wasn't, but you'd have
Yeah,
your peers come in and say, "Okay, I see what you're doing. Like, maybe try some of this or whatever." But yeah, like 12 years watching other peers have success, go on to show at really great galleries, and you're just like, "Fuck, like nothing's happening for me."
yeah.
And then before you know it, something happens.
Can I ask you? Do you think that doing a show a year is sustainable for you? Like in a 10 year, is that a good pace for you?
No.
You're gonna have to slow down. You think?
Y Yeah, I mean, I can produce, but I think the ideas need time.
Yeah, yeah.
How do I,
It's like
like,
stand-ups that put out specials every year. That
yeah,
the quality kind of.
yeah. I mean, it eventually starts to show. I mean, there
Yeah,
there are there are artists that I can definitely see that are just constantly producing, and the work is getting worse.
yeah,
And you're just like, that's not supposed. It's supposed to be the opposite, right? The more you do, the better supposedly it should get. Yeah, just not a show a year. Like it's nice. Like when I launched with Charlie, it was great to like have stuff on the calendar and
yeah,
and be working towards deadlines. Like that's nice. Like I really work well with deadlines, and I meet my deadlines. But it would be nice, like, to space those shows out, give you time to experiment. Like I'm working on something as a as is to propose to just to do it off site so that I could also exercise some paint. Like I have paintings in my studio that are 10 years old that
Mm-hmm.
I've kept because I know they're important to the sort of lineage of my progress,
Yeah.
but they haven't been seen.
Yeah.
And so like I want to go back and I always say those are kind of like bookmarked.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to go back and open those series up and really expand on those works. And I think I'm doing that for this maybe towards the end of the year. And it's just like an installation and maybe 3 or 4 paintings. But I need
Cool.
to do that so
Yeah.
like that is part of my CV,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, taking our time, it doesn't have to be 10 years, but some middle ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we've exacerbated the whole young genius idea, like, getting out of grad school and like you're gonna be signed with Gagosian straight out of like grad school. And it's just
Yeah.
like, hmm, I think people might start to be catching on to the sort of like the production aspect of making artists, forging forging
Forging
legacy.
artists.
Yeah, forging
Yeah.
artists,
I
yeah.
have an episode about that that we can talk about off air because it hasn't come out yet. But yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for coming to the show. I definitely appreciated it. It's always great to have new insights from people. I feel like you know some of my Latino artist friends, and then you
Yeah,
don't know some of my Latino artist friends, which is nice because
nice.
it like this the community of the Latinos in the art world,
Yeah.
and I kind of include Tita, even though she's not,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
she's part of that crew.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just interesting. The more because when first thing that you have access to when you come out here is just the white spaces, because there's
Mm-hmm.
so many of them.
Yeah,
It takes a while to sort of like meet people and whatnot. So
yeah.
it's the more I learn, the more I feel at home with these communities, with this community, because I just feel like the conversations are a little bit more relevant to our experience,
Yeah.
and I think by our experience I mean a lot of us have direct impact, have been directly impacted by American imperialism,
Mm-hmm.
and if we learn our histories, we get sad.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we're American now, but America's what made us
I mean, we've
American.
we've been contaminated,
Yeah,
Like I think that's also important to reconcile with is
yeah,
that we haven't gone through this thing without collecting some scars.
yeah, for sure,
And I
for
think
sure.
we might be trying to hide those scars
All the
and
time.
deny them, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, no, I hope, thank you so much for having me, and I really hope I didn't butcher it or,
No,
you
no,
know,
don't. Yeah, it's always you always feel vulnerable after talking for 2 hours with someone asking you questions
yeah,
and then them not really giving that much
yeah.
back. You're super exposed right now and vulnerable, but you did a great job.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. And if you guys enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. And like us, give us 5 stars on your audio podcasting platform of choice. And we'll be back next week with another guest and another topic that may or may not be art related.